Shalom and welcome to another edition of our Daily Bread. I'm Messianic Torah, and this week's Parashat is the first Parashat of the book of B'reisheet, also called Genesis, and it's called B'reisheet, which means in the beginning. And this week's Parashat starts back in Genesis, or B'reisheet 1:1 through 6:8, with the half-Torah in Yeshayahu, or Isaiah 42:5 through 43:11. And this week's Parashat, my message for 2017-18 is called The End from the Beginning. So, first of all, I want to say welcome back. And you're probably going to have to say welcome back to me because you probably noticed that I hadn't put up some videos in a little bit. I had a little break there. And some of that was started off with the fact that I was trying to do post-production graphics on the videos to kind of add some new things. But the problem was that just took too much time. So I had all these videos recorded, and then I never was able to get them edited and up in time. It was just too much. So now I'm not doing that. So we have increased the production quality of our videos, but we're doing it in real time. So that makes more sense. So you should see more videos coming from me. So if you had a little break, now I'm back. Now I'm excited as well because, of course, life always can be crazy. And there's never, what you'll find is you have to always refresh yourself. This is what the Torah portion is all about, right? We're going through the portion again. We'd already been here. But we need to remind ourselves. We need to refresh ourselves. That goes for us individually. That goes for us spiritually. Every year we finish the holy days. You get to Yom Kippur and you realize, you know what? I got some sins. I got old sins. Maybe I got new sins. You look at yourself. You try and clean house, just like Passover. You try and eliminate the sins from your life so that hopefully next year you come back to Yom Kippur and you got less sins every year, because you're aware of it. That's the first phase, is just being aware of it. Same thing with the Torah portion. We come back to the Torah portion because we need to. Because we will tend over time, and I see it among Messianics a lot, and you just see it with people, period. It's the same reason, this phrase of backsliding Israel. It's the same thing with the whole planet. What happens in the end days, as it says, is it's going to be as in the days of Noah, right? So we have this time of real wickedness, and then we go through these periods of righteousness and then wickedness and righteousness. But eventually, it goes back to where there's, the world ends up sliding into further and further corruption. Well, we do that individually as well. We can get lazy. We can, when you see somebody new, I've been Messianic for a decent amount of time, and I've seen a lot of people kind of come and go. And when you see that new zeal, it's always interesting, because I remember I have stories of myself and my wife when we first became Messianic, and some of the extreme zealousness, and it's really great. Sometimes it's tempered with ignorance, so you have to understand that. And I've studied with different people, and sometimes I study with new people who come in and they're all zealous, and part of that's really awesome because you're thinking, there's a lot of people who've been around that have lost their zeal. They need to regain that first love, kind of as is mentioned in the book of Revelations. I feel like there's that first love, and then but with that zeal sometimes comes a lack of wisdom. So a lot of times, if I'm studying with somebody fairly new, I'm very patient and I'll allow them to be very zealous. You don't try and move them one direction or another. They've got to learn and experience and go through those things. But over time, you hope that wisdom will kick in, and that people will also grow, and they'll look back at some of the things that they might have thought and realize, okay, I was young, I didn't know exactly how it worked, I didn't have a lot of wisdom or knowledge. And then hopefully you grow. But in that growing phase, it's easy to become where you kind of to slip away and lose your zealousness for things. It's easy to accept things, and maybe you were very strict about how you observe Torah, and then slowly it kind of wanes away. So this is an important lesson for everybody to check themselves. And that's what the holy days allow us to do every year, and that's what the new Torah portions allow us to do. Don't go in assuming, oh, I've been here, before 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, right? It doesn't matter, because there's new stuff that you're going to learn every time. And this is what got me thinking about this idea, the end from the beginning. And actually, we start off with the verse where it comes from. So this is an interesting thing that we see with this idea of the end from the beginning. And it got me thinking when I was sitting here getting ready to go back to B'reisheet, as I've been there many times before. And I'm looking at the bullet points and thinking, what am I going to write my message about? And I usually start by breaking down the core, no matter how many times you go through it. Don't assume you know things. Go right to it and erase what you think you know and look at it with a fresh set of eyes every time. Because your perspective has changed. You've learned new things. Everything you've learned, all the little tidbits start to add up, and they start to alter your lens that you look at the Torah and the world with. So you don't want to clog that up with the blindness of thinking you already know. So I approach it all the time as if I've never seen it before. And I'm looking at, okay, so let's assess first what's basically going on here. And what's basically going on is you have the creation of all things. In the beginning, right there. The creation of all things. We start with creation. Now you get through all that Torah to the end, and you see how that played out, all the people, the new kings, the old kings, the new people, the prophet. You follow the story of Yisrael all the way from the beginning and up to going into the kingdom. And it's the same kind of small picture that we see in Parashat B'reisheet. We start with the creation, and then we get to man, and then we start to see what man does. Now, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that this creation starts, and all things are created in the beginning, right? Then we get to God saying something to man. Here's man among all of the creations. And then God tells him, you can eat freely of any of the trees, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you cannot eat, right? For the day that you eat thereof, you'll surely die. And so that made me think, you know what? We get the first sin here, right? And what was the first sin? The desire, right? The desire to have the one thing, and this is just an example of one thing that man was told that they couldn't have, right? So you could have everything. You could eat of all the trees, except for this one. Now, who says that this tree was better fruit than what else you had out there? Maybe it wasn't. Could have been total garbage. As a matter of fact, it's funny because we're going to learn that when we look at sin, a lot of sin comes from our desires, right? Even when they talk about Hava eating from the tree, and she's sitting there looking at it, and she says, that it was a tree that you could desire to make you wise, right? The fact is, you don't know that. You haven't eaten from it. You don't know that it's going to make you wise. Maybe it makes you stupid, right? The only thing that we know about the tree is that the tree was one tree out of all the creation that they weren't allowed to eat from. So what did they want? And they, by they I mean us. What does sin represent? It represents the thing we can't have. You see, God created all things. And then he said, you can't have them all. Right? As a matter of fact, he gave them 99% of everything, except for one thing that they couldn't have. And guess what they wanted? The one thing that they couldn't have. They weren't satisfied with having everything. They weren't satisfied with having all creation, right? They wanted it all. When you look at it and you think about that, you see how greedy that is. That the real sin was that they couldn't have everything, right? They wanted everything. And I think that teaches us something really fundamental about sin, right? We go back to this first sin and we can learn some fundamental lessons about sin and see things that we hadn't seen before about sin. Because all the things, all the different sins, stealing, it's desiring something that doesn't belong to you. If it doesn't belong to you, thus, it is one of those things you cannot have. How important is the trinket that you steal? The things may be important, they may not. Most likely, they're not. So, it's that simple thing. Look at adultery, right? Lust. It's a momentary pleasure, right? Pleasure doesn't last forever. It's not like, hey, I stole this thing, and then I was in a state of bliss for the rest of my life, right? Someone takes another man's wife, sleeps with her for 5 or 10 minutes. Now that could be a death penalty, for 5 or 10 minutes of pleasure, right? Think about Esav and Yaakov, a bull, a bite of food. I've had some great meals, but they're gone. I've had amazing cheesecake, but it's not with me now. It tasted great in the moment, but it's not here. It's so temporary. It's like life. So why would you give up your entire life, spending years, for 5 moments of satisfaction, of joy, of pleasure, of desire? And what you'll find is that a lot of sin goes along this way. It's people driven by their emotions, right? Because that flares up, whether it be anger or jealousy or envy or whatever it is. It flares up for a moment. And then you make a decision that has lasting ramifications. You're letting something permanent be affected by something that's entirely temporary to the 10th degree. You're giving up, right? Everybody looks at Esav and thinks, why would you give up your birthright for a bowl of food? No matter how hungry you are, right? But yet we do this stuff all the time. Every time we sin, the sin is never lasting. The rewards of sin are never lasting, right? They're almost always momentary. So it takes us back to this idea of it's this desire. Why do we do this? It's something that we can't have. We're like a cat with a laser pointer. We're chasing that thing that we can't get. And then we just want to chase it more. But you're never going to get it, right? You're never going to be satisfied by sin. Because sin is just a momentary desire, and it's a lack of self-control, right? So we're given everything, and then there's some things we're not given. And those are the things that a lot of times represent sin, is when we go for those things. So it really got me thinking, and as you start to apply this to the Torah portion, I thought this was interesting. Because it was the desire for all things. It's the desire that nothing is withheld from us. We chase things we can't have. People do it in relationships, right? Look at marketing, look at TV, look at how these things are, the Hollywood version of women, right? Is, they've got to be beautiful and skinny and all these different things. They try and raise the bar to the highest, and if you looked at the average person, they're not that. They don't have perfect teeth and the perfect body, and and this tall, and all these different traits. So by putting there out, why do companies do that? Because they know that you're not going to achieve that. And so by putting out something that you're not going to achieve, then they can keep you always striving and buying their garbage, right, in order to think that you're going to try and achieve this. The fact is that it's this desire of all, of having it all. You got to have it all. In our world, there's more available to us than there ever has been in the history of time, right? I mean, my kids were raised where they can go to the water faucet, turn it on, and have pure, clean drinking water as much as they want, whenever they want. You compare this to other countries, right? Third world countries where there isn't clean drinking water. Even the dirty, filthy, disease-ridden water takes a lot of effort to find and to go get, just so that people can try and survive. And here, my kids can have as much as they want, whenever they want. And they've never known anything different. So to them, that's just life. Air is free, clean water is free, it's everywhere, and as abundant as needed. But as we see with people and all these natural disasters and things that are happening, you see that, instantly your life can change, and you can realize that the things that you took for granted, right? I mean, I've said it before. You go to a grocery store, and you can buy food from all around the world, spices from India, oranges from Mexico, and chocolate from Africa, right? You're buying things. Only the richest kings in the history of the world were able to have these delicacies brought to them from all over the world. It's never been possible before. The average poor person, right, even in the United States, has access. If they're eating a hamburger or something, they're getting stuff from all around the world. They're eating like kings for 99 cents, right, for a couple bucks. We have all this available to us, but it's never enough, right? So we have to learn to self-control and to control our desires. Because when we learn that, when we first start with the basic, I don't have to have all things, right? Imagine if Adam would have thought that, and Hava would have thought that. You know what? We've got everything. We don't have to have all things. I don't have to have it all. Look at greed. People spend their whole lives chasing money, and many of them may never find it. Right? It was that thing that they couldn't have that they spent all their time chasing. Meanwhile, there's other things available to them, such as Torah study, that they could have chased, that they could have gone after. And as it says, knock and the door will be opened unto you. They could have attained these things. But if you look at this, look at an example, adultery, right? A lot of times when you see adultery or cheating, in a relationship, say the guy has a date with or cheats on his wife with somebody at work. A lot of times what happens is the wife looks and it's like, wow, she's not even as pretty, or someone else looks and goes, wow, she's not even as pretty as his wife that he already has. Why is he doing that? Because she was the thing that he couldn't have. Because it goes right back to the root of sin is wanting it all. Because there was an opportunity to have something else than what he had. And because also by nature that he couldn't have it, in some ways he wanted it more. And it's not just about that relationship. It's about an underlying problem in our hearts that we want the things that we can't have. That the minute someone says, this isn't for you, don't look at this, you want to look at it. The minute someone says you can't have that, you want to try and have that. Someone says, oh, that's too hard, you want to prove them wrong and show them, no, it isn't. There's an element of that is this desire to have all things. And we need to recognize that element and overcome that if we want to grow into the type of people that are godly. Because let's look at the godly person on the other side of that. The godly person doesn't work all 7 days. They work 6 days in God maybe arbitrarily. We don't know the depth of exactly why God does everything. Said, you're not going to work on the seventh day. Obviously, it was tied to creation, which even more so proves the point. If creation is all things, but you can't have everything. I mean, it's something as silly as you just can't work that day. Like that's something that seems just ridiculous in some ways. It's like saying you can't wear purple socks on Tuesdays. What would happen? You'd have some people secretly wearing purple socks on Tuesdays because they were told that they couldn't. Like the thing itself doesn't matter. It's just like the kosher eating laws, right? You can eat this animal, but not that animal. It doesn't have to be because one's good for you or one's bad for you. He could remix it and say, hey, camels are in now, cows are out. It really doesn't matter. The fact is it's about self-control. It's about overcoming your desire. At the core, the desire and the hunger of your mouth, right? But we have hunger in our eyes. We have hunger in things, that we touch, things that we listen to, right? These are all of our gates. And we're supposed to guard our gates. Because some stuff's okay to come in and some stuff isn't. Right? That's defense. A walled city is considered a defense city. So one thing that you'll notice about God's people are simply, people who don't want to have it all. Doesn't mean you have to be poor. But they don't have to have it all. As a matter of fact, they purposefully, Yom Kippur is a great example, choose not to eat. Some people during Yom Kippur, they're thinking about food. They're talking about food. Oh, I can't wait till this is over. We're going to have this big feast. Right? Are they really observing Yom Kippur? Because they want those things. Some of them may just feel like, well, I can't. I can't because Leviticus 23 says I can't. They're not strongly doing it. They're not saying, you know what? I could eat. I choose not to. Because this is important to me. Right? Going beyond just the requirements of the commandment. Right? To learning the lesson. It's about self-control. It's the fact that what you see on the other side with God's people is people who don't eat certain things, who don't work at certain times, who do certain things while other people in the rest of the world is doing some things they don't partake. Right? You look at the world. The world even, it's all about everything goes like why can't, this whole idea with, that it's love, just love everybody the way they are, no matter what. Which is really a funny kind of contrast when you say it, because people don't really love everybody. They don't love the person who would break into their house and steal their stuff, even though they think, well, it's easy to say that kind of stuff and say, oh, let everybody, hey, these guys, they want to do, marry who they want to marry, or whatever. They don't care because it doesn't affect them. But if all of a sudden they started saying things that would affect them, they might have a different point of view. All of a sudden, if you say, hey, you know what, who are we to tell, the robber that, he doesn't identify with the owner of my things, right? Different people from different genders can say, well, I identify with this, and we're supposed to just say, oh, okay, so whatever you decide in your mind is what I have to decide in my mind. Whatever you find okay, I have to find okay. That just doesn't work out. It can't work out because you're going to have a disagreement. Someone's going to identify with something one way, right? The guy who identifies as a girl who wants to go into the girls' locker room, and my daughter's going in there, and it's like, yeah, well, I identify as a dad who isn't going to have some dude who thinks he's a girl showering with my daughter. So we're going to identify with some trouble if you try and go into the bathroom, right? This is the the emperor's new clothes. It's just craziness. But the same people who say, no, that's okay, and let's let that be okay. Okay, cool. I identify with taking your keys and having your car, and I identify with you continuing to make the payments and keeping the insurance on it. That's how I identify. I identify with you to pay off all of my debt and to give me your money. I identify with sitting in your chair. You know, this is straight caveman days. You know, the caveman walks in, clubs the guy, and says, "Hey, I identify with your cave being my cave, and now all your possessions are my possessions." Is that really what people think? Well, no, they think it only because it cost them nothing. But this is the thing, right? That's when you have lawlessness, you have the total take what you want, do what you want, and everyone has to just deal with it. That's not even how society works, you know? When somebody, when a drunk driver decides that they like to drink and get behind the wheel, it's all fun and games until they kill somebody or kill your family. Or, you know, I heard a sad story about a woman who had 6 kids, and you know, on her way from they just had 2 kids in the NICU, and she was driving to take care of them. I think she was driving home or something, and a drunk driver killed her. And now that family they got no mom because some idiot decided he wanted to get drunk. That's his free choice, right? But when he impresses that upon others is when it becomes a problem, right? And now he's killed somebody, and now they don't have a mom for the rest of their life. Now the husband doesn't have a wife. And this is the thing, right? If we just let all things that we want to do, let's just do them, well, that doesn't work. That's why there's laws. That's why there's the Torah, right? It doesn't work in society, but it also goes to this kind of thing where you start to see anything goes in society. Then you know that this is just going back to the core of sin, which is this permissiveness, this desire to do anything, no matter how wicked it is, no matter how wrong it is. And the goodness in the history of the world has always been the control, the restraint. And sometimes that means that you have to be restrained, right? Some countries want to do whatever they want, and they don't like the United States because the United States might say, no, we're not going to let you do that. You know, there's always going to be people who come against those who try and exercise restraint. And yet it's those people that keep us from going into those times of Noah, where everybody's just doing whatever is right in their own eyes, and you have chaos and wickedness abounds, right? Again, what happened when creation started? Darkness upon the face of the deep. There was just chaos. And as God speaks things into existence, those words create boundaries, right? Those words create boundaries for what a tree is versus a dog, right? The very word defines things. By defining it, you also separate it from all the other things. A cat is not a dog. A cat is not an alligator. A cat is not a tree. A cat is not the sky, right? A cat starts to have boundaries and definitions of what it is. And those boundaries start to create things, differences between one thing and another. And God's Torah does the same thing. He says, you can eat of all of these things, but of this one, he draws a line around it, he defines it. That's a barrier. You're not going to cross over that barrier. So this is all about crossing over barriers. It's about self-control, desire, right? And what we learn about God's people is that God's people are a particular type of people among the world. They're a kind of people that have self-control. They're a kind of people that don't desire all things. They're a kind of people that is okay saying, I'm not allowed to do that. And then they control themselves, not by force of God forcing them to obey his laws, but by their own choice, choosing to obey his laws. This is, right? This is a stable creation. What happens if a cat all of a sudden decides it wants to be a dog? Or a tree? What if trees all of a sudden try and be air? Right? God's words created and defined what they were. He gives descriptions of how the seed that has the seed within it, right, that bears fruit after its kind. He tells you how things work. The universe obeys God. Everything obeys God except for one thing: man. Man was the first thing that decided not to live within the confines of the Word of God. God creates the sun. If He tells the sun what to do, that's what the sun does. The sun is the sun and not other things because God said so. We're the only variable. We're the problem. We're the unstable creation. Hopefully, we get to that point. God's people are, right? That they stay within that boundary of what He created. The Torah is that boundary. The Torah is literally the Word of God that tells us how to be. And it's our job to learn how to live within those boundaries, thus becoming the creation of God. The other things that don't respond that way, they become like a failed creation in a sense. Now, they still define the good creation, and that is kind of the mystery of the creation. Those that do dark teach about those who do right, right? The darkness is around, but it's that contrast between darkness and light that lets you also understand the light and understand the depth of what light is and what light is not when you see that contrast. So we all get to play that role. Are we going to be the type of people who desire all things, or that are okay not desiring all things but only desiring the good things? That's wisdom. Okay? Are we the type of people that don't have self-control, or are we the type of people who can tell ourselves no? Right? This is godliness. This is wisdom, and this is goodness and righteousness. I hope this, I'm going to cut it short right there. Hope this message was a blessing for you. We're going to end at the 30-minute mark. If you like it, don't forget to subscribe and to our channel so you can watch the new videos that we bring. I'm hopefully going to be making a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't know if I'll be converting this into a podcast or not, but certainly through loveoftorah.com you can actually watch it on your mobile and listen to audio-only versions of my messages, and I'm going to get these caught up so that you'll have the audio PDF if you want to read it, audio if you want to listen to it, video if you want to watch it, however you enjoy consuming content. And hopefully we can make some kind of micro content for this too, so that if you don't want to spend 30 minutes listening to it, though I suggest that you do, we can make it into little, we can mama bird it and put it into smaller bits for people if they don't like to pay attention that long. A problem in our society. Good stuff requires a little bit more attention and effort. I've made videos that were an hour long, 2 hours long, and I've made videos that were just 3 and 5 minutes. For me, I like to dig into a topic and unpack it because I feel like, we have to stop accepting the training of our minds to be stupid. We have to stop accepting that, I can only pay attention for 30 seconds. Or, just give me the basics because I'm not able to, use my own brain and unpack it and think critically about it. This is part of the problem of our society is people are getting dumber and not smarter. So take the time, invest in yourself, listen to content. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you liked the message, if you found it valuable, if you have other things you want to add to it, disagree with it, whatever, leave it in your comments. And you can connect with us on Twitter and on Facebook. Until next time, I'm going to say shalom.
Good job.